Hi, this is Job Aguas once again, and welcome to my lectures in Philosophical Anthropology. And this is now the fourth part, part four of my lectures on the topic man as an existential subject. And for this part, I will be focusing on freedom and self determination. So, first, what is the nature of freedom? Well, we normally believe in the concept of freedom, and we believe that as human beings, we are free, that we have the power to choose the course of action, course of our action to determine our action, and not only that, to determine ourselves. So we act and behave as we do because we choose to. And nobody can force us to do what we don't want to do, or to do what we don't want to do. So it's always our choice whether to do this and do that and how we are going to do it. This is a simple understanding of freedom. But the notion of freedom as something that we really want to do is often questioned in philosophy. And some philosophers would ask, are we really free? Can we really exercise that power of choice? Okay? Or do we are we free and up to what extent? Do we really have the power to choose our actions? So this brings us to the problem of freedom and determinism. Because a determinist, on the other hand, would say, we're not free. Everything has been determined by antecedent or previous causes. Okay? So, for example, well, while I can say that I am free to do this presentation or not, but the determinist will just say, well, you are determined to do that because of the situation you are in. You have no choice but to do certain modifications in the manner by which you deliver your lesson. So there are always antecedent causes, and these antecedent causes, they determine the course of our action. So the problem of freedom and determinism starts from the fact that we generally hold people responsible for their actions. Because if we are free, then we must be responsible for our actions. But if we are not free, if we are just being determined, no, we don't have any choice, then we should not be held responsible. Okay? So there are many factors that could influence our actions and behaviors. Many of the things that happen in the world, in our lives, have been determined by external factors. Not just by external factors, they've been determined before us. Hence, the theories and doctrines of determinism say that we are not free. Okay? So, we'll take on the debate of the determinist, determinism, and libertarianism. So libertarianism is the position that we are free. Determinism is the position that we are not free. So the determinist would maintain that every event, everything in the universe, including every action, our actions, all right, are the consequences or the result of antecedent or prior causes. So if you imagine the cause-effect relation, our actions or anything that we find in the universe are just results or effects of antecedent causes. All right. So the things in the universe, including our actions, have already been determined by external and prior causes. So our actions are the products of pre-existing determining causes. So for example, wake up every morning and then you sleep at night. may appear to be your own volition, but in reality, it is determined by the rising and the setting of the sun. Right? Of course, you can say, well, I'm not going to sleep tonight, even if the sun sets. So you can say, well, that means I am free. But remember, you are just reacting to a certain situation. Your reaction has already been determined. Okay. So our choice of food, for example, is the result or consequence of our ability to buy food, which is also the result of our ability to earn money, which is also the result of our career or work. And even the food that we eat is a consequence of the people who produce and process the food, by the farmer who planted. Okay. And of course, the crops, how the crops will turn out to be determined by the climate, by the atmosphere, etc., etc. But okay, so everything has been determined. Even our career, the choice of our career, have already been determined by the resources we have for us to go to school. See, so we may have the illusion of free choice, in that we have the power to choose. But in reality, according to determinists, these are all determined in one way or another. So, in short, determinism denies human freedom. According to determinism, things naturally follow their ends, and our actions and behaviors, they have already been determined by past actions and are constantly being influenced by external factors. The human personality is within the normal course of nature, and so free will cannot exist. Because if free will did exist, it would be possible for a person to choose a course of action against the forces of heredity, for example. Okay? Those qualities that will be determined by our genetic makeup, like our gender, our height, our color of skin, our physical appearance. Okay? And the training, for example, that we undergo, which have been mounting on the opposite direction. So, determinism believes that every choice can be fully explained by previous causes. Our feeling of having freedom to choose is nothing but an illusion. Since we are not free, then we are not morally responsible for our action and behavior. Now, one kind of determinism is the soft determinism. And according to this idea, we may be free to choose, but we are not free what to choose. Our actions, according to John Stuart Mill, are human decisions, no? Or our choices are human decisions that are inevitable. Our actions and behavior are always the predictable product of our character. So, take for example, if you are a hardworking person, then you will always do your job well. If you are a lazy person, then you will always be lazy. If you are a religious person, then you are always bound to pray, right? And if you are not religious, then you are bound to do some other things. So the actions that we perform are determined by our character. So, but there is no coercion. So when we do this, there's no coercion on our part. We are simply doing these things based on our character. Okay? So we are not being forced into doing something because it's from our character, and we do certain things according to our character. So our actions are determined by our character, but we are not forced or compelled to do those actions. Therefore, we are still responsible for our actions because there is no compulsion. We are responsible for action insofar as we do what we want to do. So our feeling of being free is not a feeling of having a free will that is not determined by external causes, but the awareness of being under no compulsion to act as we do. So you call this the soft determinism. So the soft determinism is um, a middle ground between the hard determinist and libertarianism. Okay, so well, you can say it's also falling within libertarianism to some extent because there's no compulsion. Right? Libertarianism, on the other hand, is a doctrine that maintains that we are free, and it rejects the position of determinism because when we look forward to the future, there are many possible things that could happen, and whatever course of action that we can take, they can still be inconsistent with what happened before, or they may not follow the external factors, or they may not follow the antecedent causes. Okay? Our future action can never be determined or predicted because whatever we do in the future, they can either follow what has happened before or not follow what has happened before. Okay? And anything that we do will not be inconsistent with what happened before. Now, this is the position of the American philosopher William James, who maintains this libertarian position. The universe, according to James, is an unfolding system which cannot be completely predicted based on past events or based on antecedent or prior causes. So when we think of the future, we can imagine many different possibilities, and many of them will be logically consistent with what happened before, but they happen. Okay? So for James, possibility or chance is a real factor in things. Before we decide on whatever career to follow, there may have been many choices, but we decided on this one career. But whatever it is, it will never be in contradiction with what happened in the past. So whether we have money to pursue this course or whatever, no, our actions are determined. Our feelings of regret and moral experience, well, it does not make, it makes sense that we regret because if everything has really been determined, why resent the choices that we make today? But the thing is, we always resent and we always regret. That means we had options before, only that we did not exercise it correctly, right? So for James, uh, we regret the occurrence of things that are bad, and we feel bad when our actions are not doing are not going right, precisely because we could have done otherwise. And if we can do otherwise, that means we are free. So if we regret of taking this career, for example, then that means recognize that we could have decided against it and take a different course. That means we are free to make decisions. Right? So while the determinists look to the antecedent causes as something that determines the present, the libertarian looks at the future and say, well, there are so many different possibilities, so many things that could happen in the future. And although they can be consistent in the past, they can still happen because of our free choice. Now let's go to the existentialist notion of freedom. Because the existentialists and the phenomenologists have a different idea of freedom. According to them, we create our own essence out of our own freedom. Okay? So it's not just a freedom of doing something, it's a freedom based on being somebody. Okay? So, according to them, our nature as human beings are not fixed like objects. Okay, the nature of objects are fixed. Those are the things that can be determined. They have fixed nature. They are permanent. Okay, but man is different because we are subject. We have the capacity to choose and determine our actions and ourselves. Man can choose within the limit of his finitude how he will act and how he will live and how he will be. So absolute freedom here doesn't mean that you know we can do whatever we want to do. No. Absolute freedom means that nothing is simply given, meaning nothing is determined. And since nothing is given or determined from the outside, then man can decide whatever he wants to make of himself. But this doesn't mean, of course, that man is free to do anything that he likes. It simply means that he is free to do whatever he believes he can and actually do. It's nonsense to say, well, I believe I can fly, but you cannot actually fly. Right? So, man is totally free in the sense that man is not determined by his past. His own personality is his own project, its future creation, and therefore he's totally responsible for whatever he does to himself. One of the proponents of this idea of freedom is the French philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre. According to Sartre, we are what we make of ourselves. We possess our own self, and we are the ones who determine the kind of person that we will be. Through our freedom, we define our essence. That means we are our own individual. We shape, we form our own individual personality or individuality. Freedom makes possible our individual essence. And according to Sartre, there's no escape to this freedom. We are condemned to be free. Right? So he said, before we create our own individual essences or individual subjectivity, we are nothing but free individuals. We are nothing. By nothing there, it doesn't mean that we are absent. Nothing simply means that there is no universal essence. No universal essence. Nobody defines who we are. We are nothing. And then we create our own essence out of that freedom. So we become what we are. So imagine, for example, a blank board, nothing in there, nothing is written. Consider that yourself. Nothing is written there. And it will be you who will write something on the board that will create who you are. And whatever you write on the board will define who you are. And because you are the ones writing on the board, those that you have written are your responsibility. So you become responsible for the person you become. So it is our true freedom that we create our own individual essences or subjectivities. So since we are the ones who define who we are, there is nobody who will create our essences or individual subjectivities. So Sartre goes on to say that because our essence is our freedom, and we cannot distinguish our being with our freedom, then we are freedom ourselves. Our being is our freedom. We do not exist and later on become free. Sartre says, man does not exist first in order to be free subsequently. There is no difference between the being of man and his being free. Of course, how do we relate our past to our future or present project? According to Sartre, the meaning of the past is strictly dependent on our present project, and that project is ourself. means that the fundamental project, which is who we are, decides absolutely the meaning which the past have for us and for others. So, we look at the past. Are they good or bad? Meaningful and meaningful? It depends on you. How you're going to determine or how you're going to look at your past. It will be your attitude. Well, you've been poor, so it's up to you how you're going to make sense out of being poor. All right. So it will be a constraint being poor. It will be a constraint. If you consider it to be a constraint, it will be an opportunity if you consider it to be an opportunity. So it's you who decides whatever meaning you're going to give to your past. So we can project ourselves toward our future, preserve the past within us. It is us who will determine whether the past is a constraint, or the past will help us in the present and in the future. If we consider our past experiences obstacles, then there will be obstacles. If we consider them to be opportunities, then they will help us in the present and in the future. They will provide us with opportunities. So it is man who decides on how to look at his past and the meaning of this past. And of course, Sartre also warns us against the trap of labeling ourselves, for this only denies our freedom. Okay? So the labeling is, for example, you are labeled to be this and that. You are a good professor, for example. You are a good student, for example. When you allow other people to put label on you, or you yourself put a label on you, then you deny your freedom because you trap yourself, you box yourself into that idea. So people can put labels on us. No? They make us this kind of person, or this kind of student, or this kind of teacher. Labels become our identity only because we allow them. So when we allow people to label us, then we allow them to define who we are. And when we allow people to define who we are, we don't exercise our freedom. And that is bad faith. That is bad faith. So we are the ones who should define us. We should not allow other people to put label on us. Okay? So the attempt to label us will deny our freedom. That's again bad faith. So in bad faith, we see ourselves as the products of our circumstances, or the attempt to identify ourselves with our past choices, while closing off our future possibilities. So in bad faith, we become a kind of a being that is identified or has a fixed identity. But as free individuals, we must exercise our freedom and create or invent our own essences. Because nothing is fixed from the outside. It is us who will exercise our freedom and create our own subjectivities, our own essences. And we take responsibility for them. Now, related to this is the idea of Carl Wojtyła of self-determination. For Wojtyła, freedom is a transition from the I can to I will. I can do this, then I will do this. Okay? It is an act of freedom when we say, I will do this, I will study my lesson, I will do the requirements. There are things which we can do, but freedom is exercised when we are able to do what we want and what we will. This notion of freedom involves self-determination, meaning it's the self that determines itself. Almost similar to what Sartre said about that we are what we do. Okay? So self-determination is the ability of the self to decide and choose for itself. But this is based, of course, on the condition that we do not allow others to decide for us, or choose for us, or think for us. So self-determination entails being able to decide for oneself and being able to be what one really wants to be. And freedom or self-determination is based on two things. First is the efficacious, no, um, the efficacious agent or the doer of the act, the moment of efficacy that we have talked about in the previous discussion. We are the agent of the act. We are the efficacious agent of the act. We are the doer of the act. Okay. So we, as the agents that performs the act, we are therefore, no, we have the responsibility to determine our own actions. Nobody therefore will have, can, will, or choose or decide for us. The second is that when you talk of freedom, it means that we are not compelled by external objects. That means the self can detach itself from the external object. Wojtyła has a very nice distinction of this explanation for this. And he calls this transcendence. You have the vertical transcendence, so it's going up, and the horizontal transcendence. So when you say vertical transcendence, you have the self can stand out of itself, vertical. And because the self is up, it determines the self. Okay, it governs the self. Okay, so it's the self that is over the self, determining itself. Horizontal is when the self, so the relation is horizontal, when the self can detach itself from external objects. Okay, so the self is not determined, not uh, is not compelled by external object. You can see the food there, but you can say, well, I don't have to eat now, or I will not eat that food because although it is very delicious, it's not mine. So the self exercises this transcendence. It detaches itself from the external object. It is not compelled by the external object. So that is our discussion on freedom and self-determination. And thank you very much for listening, and keep safe, and God bless.